Vikings Giants, last game of the 1 p.m. slate here. How do we feel about this one? Where are we going? What's the matchup that matters for Vikings at Giants?
It's Minnesota's edge players versus Daniel Jones, I guess by default, the Giants offensive line, which should be better because the bar is extraordinarily low. Allow the third most pressures, third most sacks, most quarterback hurries. So Daniel Jones didn't really have any time to work with or anything to work with for that matter.
Right.
And what you're going to see from Brian Flores and the Minnesota defense is he's going to blitz the hell out of you.
Right. Yes.
What's interesting, though, is that last season, not all of those blitzes resulted in pressures. The Vikings were very middle of the road when it came to pressure rate in 2023. And I do think, though, that this year, more of those blitzes are going to get home because of the fact that you have two very viable pass rushers on either side of this defensive line, which is more than Brian Flores has ever had in his career. Prior to coming to Minnesota and having Danielle Hunter last year, he had never had a double-digit sack guy. Now you have two potential double-digit sack guys in Jonathan Grenard, who had 12 and a half sacks last year for the Texans.
Yeah, great.
And you went out and got Dallas Turner with a first-round pick. So you have now two bookends to this defensive line that I think are going to end up getting home on all of these pressures, these blitzes, all of that kind of stuff. It's going to make life really hard for opposing quarterbacks. And I fully expect Minnesota and Brian Flores to still get creative with all of those simulated pressures and bringing different guys from different levels of the defense and all that kind of stuff, involving all those guys in the pass rush. But at the end of the day, you have two really good bookends. And that's going to be, to me, scary to go against. I don't know. You saw Kevin O'Connell's face when Kwesi told him that they were trading up to go get Dallas Turner. He was just like, what? We're going to do what? He was so excited, and for good reason.
It was that was one of the best behind the scenes moments that we had in the draft for sure. Yeah. Dalton mentioned this again when we were going through the divisional preview show. He talked about how Flores' defense, just to sort of piggyback on what you were saying, Flores' defense are so unique. They're so mysterious. You never know who's coming. You never know who's dropping, right? And I think at the linebacker level specifically, those edge rushers, he wanted that flexibility to do both. And I was of the camp where I was like, man, I cannot believe they moved on from Danielle Hunter. Just one of the best top edge rushers in the NFL, most productive guys when he's been out there and healthy. He flips and goes to Houston. They bring in John Grenard. Then they draft Dallas Turner. And when Dalton was talking, it's like, okay, yeah, actually, now you have the ability with Turner and with Grenard and with Van Ginkel as well.
Yeah, I forgot to mention Van Ginkel. Such
drop these guys.
Versatile player.
Yeah, so it's the versatility of this defense, I think, was just taken to another level with the personnel that they have. And so I think that's a really good call out by you. I think also just understanding, look, I'm not trying to say that Daniel Jones is blameless. He had plenty to get better with this year, but the offensive line stunk last year. There's no other way around it. And so both parties have to play better. We'll see if they can get off on the right foot. I will switch to the other side like we have done a couple of times on this show, and I'll talk about the trenches on the other side. The Vikings offensive tackles specifically versus the Giants edge rushers. Vikings offensive tackles, it's Christian Darrisaw and it's Brian O'Neill. These guys were the two highest graded pass blockers that we had on the Vikings last season. Darrisaw, 85.3 pass blocking grade. O'Neill, 73.4 pass blocking grade. So if you want two of them that could be your top pass blockers, they're in the right spots because they're going up against Brian Burns, who the Giants obviously paid a lot to go out and get, and then Kayvon Thibodeau. Now, here's the thing. In theory, sounds great. Burns has yet to really take that next step to be an elite pass rusher. He's at a pass rush grade, pass rush win percentage in double digits for most of his career, but it hasn't been above that 15% like we really want to see from him. It's a tough test this week against these two offensive tackles, no matter which side he is on. And at the same time, if you look at Kayvon Thibodeau, double-digit sacks last year, but a pass rush win percentage of just 6.3%. He obviously racked up sacks, but it was not consistent pressures. He was not winning one-on-one consistently. So did Kayvon take that next step this offseason? is him on a defensive line with now Brian Burns and Sexy Dexy in the middle. Like, is this now a defensive line where he is getting all of these one-on-ones and he can actually win them? I thought when I was going to go back to watch his 11 and a half sacks, that I was just going to see a bunch of cleanup sacks, a bunch of effort sacks. That's it. Half of them were cleanup and effort sacks, but the other half are good. The other half were like great hand usage, good bend, like what we saw at Oregon. So the flashes are still there for him. Let's see who wins this matchup. It's a tough one for the Giants edge rushers to come out of the gate. But I think if they show well against these two good pass protectors on the offensive tackle side of things for Minnesota, it could be a good year for this Giants defensive line. And again, on the flip side, if Darisaw and O'Neal end up playing really well and shutting these guys down, well, you got a lot more faith in the passing game what Sam Darnold could be here. What about a plus factor for this one?
I'm going to go kind of obvious here, and it's Malik Nabers, because this is an LSU receiver show. I think it's turned into that, apparently, which is fine. It's great.
It's sort of an LSU receiver league at this point.
So it's true.
Good point. We just happen to be talking about it.
I mean, this is a guy, 43 catches, gaining 15 or more yards in the second in the FBS, fourth most missed tackles, forced on receptions, and 589 yards after the catch, which ranked 10th. He's a phenomenal player, and he was drafted accordingly. And he's going against a Minnesota secondary that isn't deep, that has taken its losses quite literally, unfortunately, in Kyrie Jackson. And Stephon Gilmore at this point is kind of the best they have. So 72.3 coverage grade, allowed a 52% completion rate, which ranks him 21st among all DBs, which isn't bad. He's allowed 4 touchdowns, but I mean, outside of Stephon Gilmore, what else do you have? It's going to be hard.
Right.
I don't know. So like we're gonna see how that works out, but I think that Malik Nabers is gonna have a pretty good entrance into the league in this game in particular.
I'm always like worried about the expectations that I have about Malik Nabers right now, because I genuinely think
he's like to the moon.
I mean, I think that he could have a year like Odell Beckham Jr. had back when he won Offensive Rookie of the Year for this team in 2014, and that was like 12 touchdowns, like almost 1,400 yards. That was an incredible season. I'm sitting here going, yeah, I mean, Nabers could, I guess. Now, he doesn't have Eli Manning throwing him the football. It's Daniel Jones, and it's an offense that's still really trying to figure things out. But I think over 1,000 seasons, maybe even 10 touchdowns is well within the realm of possibility for Nabers, because he was unstoppable last year. And I think that he's going to be the top passing weapon that we have here on this team.